So the round of 16 games are over, and honestly, we had one of the most crazy set of results we have ever seen with some of the biggest teams going out. And in this video, I'm going to be going through some of my reactions to some of those games, but also looking forward to what is a juicy set of quarterfinal games in Euro 2020. So let's start off with the first round of 16 game, and that was Wales versus Denmark. An extraordinary game. You've got one team on one hand who had suffered quite a lot throughout the group stages. Obviously Denmark losing to Finland, obviously the whole Christian Eriksen thing. And then on the other hand, you had Wales, a team that didn't necessarily look as good as it did in the last Euros when they got to the semis, but a team that had that experience. In the last episode I talked about how I thought that experience would help them, but it just didn't. They absolutely capitulated. Denmark were fantastic. I think their backline were especially amazing. Christensen was fantastic. Højbjerg and Delaney in the middle were great as well. And honestly, in the second half, they just tore apart that Wales team. And that Wales team, you could just see everything drain out of them as the game went on. And I think, yeah, all in all, it was a fantastic performance from Denmark. Really, really good team. And now many people are saying, Turkey were the dark horses of many people going into the competition. Now very much people are thinking it could be Denmark because of how well they did. I think I'd apply the word of caution to it. That Wales team were not very good. The group they were in was very average. And they kind of just about only lost 1-0 to an Italy team, and I don't think they were that good. So let's not get too carried away with Denmark. I think they are a good team, but I think when they come up against stronger opposition, which inevitably will happen as they progress throughout the competition, things could get very juicy for them. So then let's talk about who Denmark are going to be playing in the quarterfinals, and that is surprisingly Czech Republic, who came through what many thought going into the game would have been a very difficult game for them against the Netherlands. A Netherlands team that had looked very impressive throughout the group stages, had scored the most goals out of anyone throughout the group stages, and honestly, I think no one would have predicted this. I wouldn't say I predicted it, but I put a bit of caution onto it. If you look at the last video, I said Netherlands haven't faced any good teams. Their defense isn't that good. Dumfries and Van Aanholt are good going forward, but not so good going back. And Daley Blind is not so good at the back, and De Ligt, still hasn't proven himself at the highest level. And that's exactly what happened. I think attacking-wise, they were good. I think Daniel Marlon was actually very, very good, obviously, before he got pulled off when De Ligt got sent off. But I thought Daniel Marlon was very good. Depay seemed a little bit absent throughout the game. But they did look like they were posing a threat on Czech Republic. Czech Republic, to their credit, were very strong defensively in particular. We saw that all throughout the group stages. Patrick Schick, again, had an okay game. Obviously he got the goal, but he wasn't that good, and I think he just looked impressive against some of the weaker nations at the beginning of the tournament. But yeah, Croatia, Holes, or I think that's how you say his name, Holes or Holes, I'm not sure how you say his name. The pain for me was that he was in my fantasy team but on the bench. But what a fantastic performance from him. Absolutely ran the midfield, showed Gini Wijnaldum how to run a midfield. Gini Wijnaldum again wasn't a shell of himself in the game, and didn't really look like affecting it in the positive way he had been throughout the group stages. And I guess it all kind of boiled down to that Matthias de Ligt chance, or that 30 seconds around that, with Netherlands missing a chance with Daniel Marlon, who definitely should have scored when he was one-on-one with the goalkeeper, to going all the other end where Matthias de Ligt slipped. And then, yeah, as Gary Neville says, once you make one mistake, you make another mistake trying to make up for your first mistake, and that's exactly what he did, kind of shoveling the ball away with his hand, which it had to be a red card. It was the only option. And after that, you thought, Netherlands still could have regrouped, had the time to, get their shit together, basically, and put on a decent performance and hold Czech Republic out, but try and score maybe on the break. And they just didn't know what to do. And I guess that's what ultimately led to De Boer kind of leaving his role, because a lot of people were questioning after it. It's like that half an hour, 40 minutes after the sending off, you still had an opportunity. It was still 0-0. You weren't losing at that time, but the way the team was organised, the way that they were set up to try and cope with Czech Republic, but also try and get a goal, just wasn't there. And I think that's what people were frustrated with about most, and ultimately cost him his job. But for Czech Republic, fantastic result. Schick getting another goal, Holes being amazing, and yeah, now they go on to face Denmark, which should be a very interesting game. Not a quarter-final lineup that many people would have predicted, but I think just based on how Denmark were playing, and I think they just a bit more stronger defensively than Czech Republic, and I think they got a bit more going forward as well. And so I think, yeah, Denmark are going to progress, and it'll be huge for them going into the semi-final. Obviously, everyone knows what happened to them in '92, and so yeah, it'll be huge for them, obviously, with the Christian Eriksen stuff as well happening this year. But I do think they're going to progress through to the semis. So let's next talk about Italy versus Austria, a very interesting game. A game that obviously going into the game, many people, including myself, were like, you know what, this is going to be an easy one for Italy, particularly how we've seen them play, both in the group stages, but all of those stats that everyone seems to be pulling out about how long they haven't been unbeaten and all this type of stuff. And they didn't really show it. The first time they came up against a team that really threw up a challenge for them, they really struggled. They didn't really make too many chances. I was a bit disappointed not to see Chiesa start. I think he started against Wales and he did really well, and he looked dangerous. And ultimately, he did come on and score the first goal to really open up this game in extra time. So I would be surprised if Mancini doesn't start with Chiesa in the quarterfinals, just because I think he's affected the game every time he's been on the pitch, a bit more than Berardi has. And so I think I love Chiesa. I think he's a fantastic player, and I really hope he plays. But this game was really strange for Italy. They never really got kind of any momentum going in the game. Mobley had a couple of shots from far out, but they didn't really create too many chances, and it looked like it was going to be going towards Austria when Marko Arnautovic was able to head the ball in, but fractions meant that he was offside, which kept Italy in the game. And I think they needed that. I think if that had gone in, it didn't really look like in normal time that Italy were really going to score or get themselves back into the game. And so that was really a huge piece of luck for Italy. But then I think as it went into extra time, because of just the huge effort that Austria had put in to the game to keep it at 1-0, as you see in many kind of extra time games, that the toll took, and Austria kind of just lost energy, and they really struggled to cope with Italy. And when they brought on players like Chiesa, they were able to just run them ragged, and you kind of knew once one went in, another one would go in. But Austria, to their credit, did still keep going. They got a goal back, which made it very interesting. It was a fantastic header at the near post for Austria's goal. They kept things going, but ultimately they just lost. They just used up too much energy trying to take it to extra time, and unfortunately they lost. But Italy will see that as they kind of got off a bit there. They didn't play as well as many people or even they would have expected, but they managed to get through ultimately, I guess, which is the main point. But yeah, definitely lots of more improvement we want to see from Italy if they really do want to face, if they want to get far in this competition and ultimately win it. So Italy will be facing Belgium in the quarterfinals. Now that is probably the tie of the quarterfinals. It's something that I'm definitely looking forward to watching. And I think it'll be a really interesting game. And that is because Belgium beat Portugal 1-0. A huge game again. Belgium are going to have to face some tough games if they're going to want to get far in this competition. But the Belgium-Portugal game was very well set up. Obviously, two big teams. Two teams that very much rely on their attacking players to win the games. You've got Ronaldo, Jota, Bernardo Silva on one side, and then you got Lukaku, De Bruyne, Mertens didn't start yet, Hazard. So much attacking talent on the pitch, and ultimately it was kind of a defender/midfielder who got the goal in Torgan Hazard, who I think was way better than Eden Hazard the entire game and has been better than him the entire competition, which is crazy because no one really knew who Torgan was until the last couple of years where he's really kind of progressed at Dortmund. But yeah, Hazard was kind of average, and the whole Belgium team was kind of meh. And you think going into the game, obviously there was a lot of talk about both defenses, but particularly Belgium's defense, because it's just aging a bit and they struggle with pace in behind, which is exactly what your likes of Jota have, which is what your Ronaldo's doesn't do so much but can do. But they didn't really do anything. I think the Belgian defenders did really well to stop Ronaldo, and I think even in the second half when Belgium really threw the kitchen sink at Belgium, they didn't really look that threatening. There were a couple of chances for them, but nothing really clear cut. And ultimately, I felt like Portugal kind of went out in the competition a bit of a whimper. And yeah, I thought they could have played a lot better. But Belgium, to their credit, did very well. Obviously, attacking-wise, they got the goal. Lukaku wasn't at his best, and so if they can get him firing in these knockout stages, they'll become even more of a dangerous threat. But more importantly for them, their defense was pretty solid, and that will give them a lot of confidence going into the Italy game that they can deal with Immobile, they can deal with Insigne, because they were able to deal with Ronaldo and co, and able to cope against them very well. But that will definitely be a huge quarterfinal, and many people are touting this as the kind of almost final at quarterfinal stage, and that many expect that the team that wins this game can almost go on to possibly win the tournament. So Italy versus Belgium should be a huge game. I'm sure it will be a huge game. And I hope both teams don't cancel each other out. I do hope they kind of go out for each other because of so much attacking talent. I think we could see some goals. It'd be interesting to see whether Chiellini comes back in the team for Italy, and he's been out for the last couple of games. I'm not sure whether he'll be back. Serbia looked okay, but Bonucci and Chiellini, when they're together, even though they're a bit older, are still so solid when it comes to defensively. But I'm gonna go with Italy. I think Italy are gonna progress. They've just looked like a better team regarding bar the Austria game. But I think Italy are gonna progress, and yeah, I think Belgium will be disappointed. And obviously there've been lots of talk about their golden generation. I think this will be the end of that. But yeah, it should be very, very interesting game nevertheless. So now let's go on to the next set of round of 16 games. And these next set of games will seem like the games where everybody preferred extra time. It feels like everyone wanted to play an extra half an hour. And we'll start off with the Croatia versus Spain game. The first goal in this game was a craziness with Unai Simon just letting the ball almost bobble over his foot and roll into the net. And it was one of those situations where you know he was thinking about the next pass, the pass he wanted to play, rather than concentrating on receiving the ball. And you know, that's just what happens sometimes. And I've seen a lot of talk about how Spain fans and players, you know, didn't really like David De Gea in goal. But from seeing that, I don't think Unai Simon is too much better. But what Spain did really well in that game, and ultimately what got them back into the game, was that they got it back into it fairly quickly. They were able to equalise before half-time, which was, I think, huge for them. It was a bit of a downer for Croatia, because I think they would have loved to have gotten 1-0 ahead, because they weren't playing so well in the first half. But then in the second half, Spain really built on that and built off the confidence of getting that first goal, and they got the second and they got the third. And there you thought, you know, maybe they're going to, you know, continue to score, because they look so dangerous. And Croatia, throughout this tournament and even in this game, looked so fragile defensively. Things just didn't look like they were going to go their way. But then out of the blue, I don't know whether it was complacency from the Spanish defenders or what, but Croatia got one. And then they got two right at the end of the game. And it was absolute scenes going everywhere. It was fantastic. It was great to see. Never really seen a game light up like that in the tournament up until that one. And it was fantastic to see. It was great to see from Croatia, who have been honestly bang average the rest of this tournament. But they got themselves into a position where they had a chance. But similar to the Italy-Austria game, I think they had to put in so much energy to get to that point, that when they got to that point in extra time, is when they really started struggling. You saw them kind of puffing a bit, and that's ultimately what led to Alvaro Morata, the guy who can never score, who I really, you know, you guys know this by now, who I really don't like, getting himself a goal, getting himself into some very good positions. And he seemed like one of those players where, you know, when you play against a team and you know they're maybe not as good, that's when he's going to go hard and try and score 3 or 4 goals and look really impressive. I still think against the better teams, he's nowhere near good enough. But ultimately, he came up clutch, and Spain came out clutch in that extra time. And yeah, Croatia just kind of faded with their energy. But Spain still look very, very average, and I don't think they look that good. And I think definitely going into the quarterfinals defensively is what they have to improve now. We've seen them score a number of goals. We saw them score 5 goals in this game, 5 goals against Slovakia in their final group game as well. So it looks like they can score goals now. Just be interesting to see what happens when they come up against a team that is just a bit better organised defensively and can cause them a few more problems. Like we saw, they struggled against Sweden in the group stages, and I'm sure they will struggle in the quarterfinal too. And so surprisingly, it's not going to be France that Spain are playing in the quarterfinals. Is going to be Switzerland in what I think is 100% the game of the tournament so far, and definitely was the game of the round of 16, definitely rivaling that Croatia-Spain game. But the France-Switzerland game was huge, was mega. And before we go into a bit more of the analysis of it, gotta say, Switzerland, really a round of applause, because they were just outstanding from the first minute to the 120th minute. Yeah, there was that little blip where ultimately it could have cost them in that kind of 5 to 10 minutes when France did get back level, and then they went on and scored the second and the third goals. But just all around performance, the energy, defensive kind of formation, and the way they were set up, but also from an attacking perspective, they were causing real problems and threats to France throughout the game, be it from when Seferovic was on and when Mehmedi came on and Gavranovic came on towards the end of the game. No matter who they had up front, even Mbolo was causing lots of problems. They just were really at it the entire game, and we've seen some of the pundits talk about the game, but this is exactly an example of when you have a team that kind of were properly got themselves motivated for a game and were up for it, which was Switzerland, and a team that maybe came into it a bit complacent, maybe thinking about the quarterfinals already. and kind of almost overlooking their opponents and ultimately paying the price for that. And Switzerland did very well, obviously getting the goal early on in the first half, which was great for their confidence. You felt like, have they scored a little bit too early though? Similar to how kind of when Hungary scored against Germany in their final group game, you thought, have they scored too early to really hold on to it? But they did really well. The first half they saw out fairly well. Didn't really have too many chances, France. But then in the second half, ultimately that pressure told with a fantastic first goal from Karim Benzema. That touch that he took was just, it was so good, so beautiful. And from then they took, control of the game. They got the second from Benzema as well, and then the third from Pogba was just absolutely world class. It was a fantastic goal. I think almost the writing was on the wall based on like the 3 celebrations he did after it. And when you saw that happen, you thought, I literally saw, the Twitter accounts that say images that preceded bad events. Literally that. When he was doing all those celebrations, you were just like, I'm sure the Switzerland players were watching that and you're like, you know what? You, Paul Pogba, you're going to pay for that. And he doesn't help himself sometimes when he does things like that. Like, just celebrate, get back to the centre circle, carry on with it, right? Don't start doing these dances with Kimpembe and all this type of good stuff. But ultimately, they were made to pay, and Switzerland got one back, and he thought, it's going to get exciting. And obviously, earlier in that day was the Croatia-Spain game where we saw a last-minute equaliser, and that is exactly what we saw again in this game in France versus Switzerland. A last-minute goal from Gavranovic, I think it was. But I think that Switzerland did really well, which Croatia didn't do very well, and which Austria didn't do very well, is they managed to find a way to keep up that energy through extra time. I think that was what ultimately won them the game. I think France really didn't, Mbappe had one chance, which he probably should have taken in extra time. But other than that, they didn't really pose too many threats, and Switzerland actually looked probably the team with more energy, and also they made a couple of chances themselves in extra time as well. And when it got to penalties, it felt like all the momentum was with Switzerland, and it was only felt like a matter of time before France were going to lose. And obviously missing a penalty in the game as well, you thought maybe could play on the minds of the Switzerland players, but no, they were fantastic, putting away all their penalties. Great. And obviously Mbappe, it was unfortunate that he was the one who missed the penalty, and as has been said, and there's nothing really more I can say to add on it. He's a young player who will learn from this experience. Everything for France for him so far has been so amazing. Euros finals, World Cups. And so, you kind of need to be brought back down to earth sometimes as a full player, even if you're as good as Kylian Mbappe is. And I definitely think this was it for him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the French team now. This team has been together for quite a while now and has had so much success, so it hasn't really been needed to really change. But it'll be interesting now to see what happens, whether Deschamps carries on or whether they bring in some players that haven't really had an opportunity in the first team because it's been so kind of fixed for so long with so many of those players. But that'll be really interesting to see. But that means that we have a Switzerland versus Spain quarterfinal, which again, probably many people wouldn't have predicted, but should be a very, very interesting game. I think Switzerland will find it tough. I think Spain are pretty good offensively. I think a big loss for Switzerland is that Granit Xhaka is going to be suspended. He was huge in that France game, and so ultimately I think that is going to be a big that is going to have a big impact on the game, and I'm going to see Spain progressing because of that. I think defensively they'll just kind of have enough to see out Switzerland. I think attacking wise with Ferran Torres, with João Moreno, etc., I think they'll have too much for Switzerland, and they'll go through to the semi-finals. And so now let's get to the fixture that I know you guys are all looking forward to me talking about, and that is the England-Germany result at Wembley. What a game, what a performance. Obviously you guys know I'm English, I live in the UK, I'm a huge England fan. And it was the perfect game. It was the perfect game. Everything that Southgate did, obviously going into the game, there was lots of talks of formation, personnel. Is Southgate being too pessimistic in the way he plays? Should we match up to Germany with a 3-4-3? Should we go a little bit different? And ultimately, he went for a 3-4-3, which I think was what I suggested he should do. And I think ultimately what he did, which just made more sense to match up against Germany. But we bossed them all throughout the game, apart from the first 10 minutes or so where they looked to be we were giving the ball away a little bit and they were winning it high up the pitch and causing us a few problems. But after that, we really controlled the ball, got hold of the ball, and things were just progressing really well for England. Throughout the first half, we really kept control of the ball. Normally, when you watch Germany play, you see Toni Kroos and Gundogan or Goretzka who played against England, just control the ball, then passing the ball out, getting the ball out to the wing backs, but also getting this ball into the likes of Havertz and Werner. And you saw none of that. Kroos was basically missing the entire game. He literally did nothing, and that was all down to one, England holding the ball, but also the likes of Phillips and Rice really getting into their faces, getting into the German midfield faces when they did get the ball, which was amazing. And then getting into halftime 0-0 was probably exactly what Gareth Southgate would have wanted, and it gave us that platform because we had the confidence of, we played well in that first half. Yes, we didn't maybe make as many chances as we wanted, but we had a very good platform to build on. And I definitely think the introduction of Jack Grealish in that second half was huge and definitely the right decision, which we have to give props to Gareth Southgate for. I wouldn't say he changed the game, but ultimately he made an assist and he made the pass to the assist for the first goal. And, you know, you have to praise Gareth Southgate and Jack Grealish for the impact that he made in the game. And once we got the first goal, it was kind of game over for Germany. And obviously they had that Muller chance, but let's talk a bit about that Raheem Sterling goal first. And let's talk about how Luke Shaw got forward for probably what was the first time in the game. And it'll be interesting to see whether we play a back three or back five against Ukraine, who we will talk about that game a little later on. But Shaw and Trippier, who were the wing backs, maybe didn't get forward as much as we would have liked to, particularly in the first half. Shaw definitely got a lot more forward in the second half, and ultimately him getting forward led to both goals, which is definitely something that I think Gareth and Luke will pick up on, and definitely I think something we'll see a bit more of in the quarterfinals and hopefully the semi-finals and maybe even the final. But it was a great ball from Jack Grealish out to Luke Shaw, crossing the ball in, and Raheem Sterling in the right place to get his third goal of the competition, completely smashing all of these England doubters out of the water, and yeah, getting another goal for his country. Fantastic goal, fantastic play. And yeah, once it was 1-0, Germany looked a bit deflated. Obviously, Raheem Sterling gave the ball away for that Muller chance, and you could see after his reaction after it was he was distraught. We were so very fortunate with that. He definitely would have put money on Muller putting away that chance, but when he missed that, they were deflated before that, you could tell, the Germans, but once he missed that chance, they felt like, you know, it's one of those days where it's not our day, and you know, ultimately it was just going to be the end of the tournament for them. And I think we built on that. They looked a bit tentative after that, and that's what ultimately allowed Luke Shaw to come in front of Goretzka, I think it was, pinch the ball back and ultimately get us the second goal, getting into Jack Grealish, who crossed the ball into Harry Kane, who was great to see him get a goal. Hopefully now that gives him the confidence. We've been waiting that fourth game into the competition where he finally gets his first goal, and hopefully we'll see now in the quarterfinals and further, we'll see the Harry Kane that we see for Tottenham. And, you know, if Harry Kane starts scoring, it's done. It's done for everybody else, because we've been scoring and winning games without him, and if he starts scoring now, that will be huge. But let's not forget as well, guys, the clean sheets, right? That is now 4 clean sheets in the Euros, and people were talking about Italy and how good they are defensively, but don't write off how good England have been defensively. The back 4, or the back, including the 3 centre backs and Jordan Pickford, were amazing in this game. Jordan Pickford made some great saves from Havertz, from Werner, but the back 3 were so good, so well organised. Any balls that came into the box, they were always the first ones there. Any free kicks that Germany had in promising positions, we would cleared them without any threat onto Jordan Pickford's goal. And we have to pick up that back 3 or back 4 because they were so good. We've been critical of them in the past, and maybe are they good enough, are they not good enough, but we have to, again, give them props when they do amazing. They played amazing and they were fantastic, and I think they're a big reason why we've been looking so promising and ultimately why we won this game. So there was a lot of pressure on that England-Germany game because we knew who the opponents in the quarterfinals would be, and that we knew it would be one of Sweden or Ukraine, and then obviously the winner going on to face in the semi-finals the winner of the Denmark and Czech Republic games. So there was obviously a lot of pressure on that England Germany game, and so we'll talk about Sweden versus Ukraine next, a result that probably was the least, well, not the least likely, but one of the most least likely results. And I actually think it's up there in terms of likelihood of results as the France-Switzerland one is, because the Ukraine team got through by the skin of their teeth, finishing 3rd in their group. Sweden had looked very impressive, held out a very good Spain team, and had played really well against Slovakia in their group as well. Forsberg, everyone was like, he's looking fantastic. Isaac, who I'd been bigging up quite a bit, it looked so promising in the group stages without really kind of getting his goals, and many didn't give Ukraine a chance, including myself, but they proved us wrong. They were really good. I think in normal time they were fantastic. Obviously they got the first goal with Zinchenko getting a goal. I think that'd be great for his confidence, but after that they kind of, I'd say they got a bit passive in the way they were playing, and they sat back a bit, which ultimately allowed Forsberg to get the goal just before half time. And that, you thought maybe, like similar to the Spain game, that could really negatively affect Ukraine, and Sweden can come out in the second half and get a second and third goal and ultimately give themselves a path through to the quarterfinals. But it didn't happen, and I honestly don't know why it didn't happen. I think that was probably down to both sides. Sweden not really wanting to commit too much and leave themselves open at the back, but Ukraine just maybe being a bit more conservative. And then it obviously went into extra time, and then the red card happened. The red card ultimately changed the result of this game. It was 100% a red card. The tackle was so high, and yeah, it just had to be a red card. But in extra time, when teams are already tired, adding a red card to things really doesn't make things any easier. And then we had yet another last minute goal. I don't even know how to say the guy's name, so we're just going to say the Ukrainian Donny scored in the last minute. Great cross in from Zinchenko, a goal and an assist from him, so fantastic performance by him. And they went through in the last minute. Sweden will be very disappointed with that result. They obviously got some great group of players, but they'll be very disappointed with going out of the round of 16. They definitely thought, when they found out they were going to be facing Ukraine, definitely thought they could make it through to the quarterfinals. And so therefore it sets up a England versus Ukraine quarterfinals. I think inevitably people are going to be favoriting England, and rightly so. England are a much better team than Ukraine. I think the thing that we have to factor in as well is Ukraine played extra time as well, and that would have taken a lot of energy out of them to go to extra time and put in that energy to beat Sweden. And I think that will have a toll to play in the quarterfinals. And that's actually the same for all of the teams that ultimately went through to extra time. That kind of fatigue and the physical side of things will, I think, negatively affect them in the quarterfinals, which is the benefit that Denmark and England don't have, is that they're going to be a little bit more fresh. Yes, they've got the ecstasy of winning around a 16 game, but they've got that energy and physical fitness that maybe some of the others won't have that did go through to extra time. And so that's a very interesting game, England versus Ukraine. I'm only predicting one result there. I think it will be a huge upset, the biggest upset of the Euros if England don't progress. But England had the incentive of, if they win this game in Rome, the semi-finals and hopefully the final are all in Wembley as well. England have played so well at Wembley so far in this Euros, and it feels like it's written a bit now based on the teams that have gone out, how well England have been playing. The draw seems to be favouring us, and some of the better teams on the other side of the draw have gone out. One of Belgium or Italy is going to go out. It just feels like it's written for England, and what everyone started singing is coming home, and it really does feel like that. It feels like the stars are aligning for England, and it very much feels like our time. Obviously, I'm frantically trying to figure out if I can get tickets to the semi-final. Hopefully, touching wood every time I'm trying to get tickets, because I don't want to jinx it and we lose to Ukraine, and I don't really want to watch Ukraine versus Denmark as a semi-final, for example. So yeah, let's hope everything goes well for England. But I definitely think they'll beat Ukraine quite easily, because of that tiredness factor as well. And I definitely see England progressing through to the semi-finals. So there we have it, guys, the end of this episode. A bit longer than normal, but I feel like there were lots of talking points throughout these round of 16 games, and it was great to see knockout football and see teams really go for it. I think that was the best thing, and I think definitely the tiredness will play into it when we think about the quarterfinals. But there are also some very good teams left in, and some of those kind of lower teams like your Denmarks, like your Czech Republics, like Ukraine's will still have a point to prove, and I'm sure that we haven't seen the end of the upsets in the Euros, and I'm sure there'll be one or two more. But thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe down below if you enjoyed this type of content, and let me know in the comments if you want me to keep doing this type of content for maybe the Premier League season. And so yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback. But thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.